Greatest things I think about the original Halo was that the music made you feel just how small you are in this massive, massive place, and how alone you are in this place, and how you stand virtually no chance. You just have to continue to keep fighting. And the soundtrack reflects that so incredibly well. You would never get that kind of nuance in a Final Fantasy game. Ever. Ever, ever, ever. You would never see that. Why? Because it doesn't need it. You know, it goes to a completely different fashion. You know, when you have the battle music and you put that in, that ends up serving a function to kind of keep pace. But how many of you have absolutely adored and loved the battle music in hour 1 of a Final Fantasy and hour 20 of a Final Fantasy? No, you grow to loathe it over time because it becomes, you know, repetitive and you know, it really starts to eat away at you, and you know, you start to kind of make fun of it. At least that's what I would do. I'd sit there and just be like, yeah, okay, I got it. Ba-da-da-da. You know, you're just like waiting for the damn music to finish, right? And it just becomes this awful thing. My point is that Halo it might have similar kind of similar arrangements, similar instruments, similar purposes, but there is a diversity in terms of the action and moving something forward and making a moment seem more momentous by virtue of the music, and I think that's brilliant. Furious George is the last one I'm going to go over here. Really, what pushes him toward more of the Final Fantasy look, although he really didn't pick either one of them, as I recall. He called it a lose-lose situation because his conclusion was Chrono Cross, which I think is a great point. You know, the reason why he goes with that is because it's what sticks with him most after the game, and this speaks to what is important about a video game soundtrack. Is a video game soundtrack? So I think you could do the same thing with movies. Is a video game soundtrack, you know, supposed to be akin to, you know, Lord of the Rings? Or is a video game soundtrack supposed to be something like, the examples that are sticking in my head right now are awful. Let's say Apollo 13. All right, so Apollo 13 uses a lot of non-original music, right, to make original, or Forrest Gump. Let's use that, right? Almost the entire soundtrack of Forrest Gump. There's a couple things that are in there that are obviously composed, kind of real active original compositions. So maybe this is a bad example, but you guys see what I'm saying. Almost all the soundtrack of Forrest Gump is music from the era, non-original music for the movie, that's utilized to make a point or serve the backdrop, right? And then you have something like Lord of the Rings, which is very functional for the movie, where you know you want the drama kind of raises, and there's crescendo and decrescendo with the action and the drama that's ensuing. And I think you have to decide which is more important to you, right? So maybe in some ways I was asked. What really comes out of this is that I'm asking you guys about what is the right kind of video game soundtrack for you. And it seems overwhelmingly that many of you, being wonderful RPG fans that you are, and I don't blame you for that at all, and many of you loathe FPS, you know, that means that you want to have that kind of emotional response. You want to be able to take those themes with you, and you want to be able to share those experiences. You know, I mean, I've never been to a convention before where you wouldn't put on the Zelda theme, and people just go crazy, right? Because they know it, and they share that knowledge of it. That being said, I think if your value is on creating a gaming experience that is very cinematic in nature and really serves to provide you with the best backdrop and, you know, the best function that gets you from point A to point B in a movie, that without it would not have anywhere near the desired effect. I think that a Halo kind of a game is more for you. And so that was kind of why I picked those guys. So that was more along my thoughts. And some of you mentioned what might have been better comparisons. I'll talk about that for a second. And before I even say that, I'll say this. I don't really have... My answer this week is I'm going to sit here and I'm going to say, you know, I'm going to agree with you guys that maybe there really isn't an answer here, that maybe, you know, I think it really depends on what you're looking for from a video game soundtrack. I have all of the Halo soundtracks on my PC and I listen to them a lot. and they are very, very good, especially for background music. But you know what? I do that with Final Fantasy music as well. So, I can't really pick between the two. I like them both a lot. And I think any of you that have played a lot of Halo will give it its credence, because it does belong in this conversation. But let's talk about some of the things that you guys suggested. I heard a suggestion for Metal Gear Solid. No, I don't think that. I think that would be even worse. If we're talking about a bad comparison, I think it would be an even worse comparison to Final Fantasy. Or something like what Mr. K said, which was to maybe take one game and compare it to another game in terms of the soundtrack. So, in other words, if I had said, well, what's better? What's a better soundtrack for you guys? Final Fantasy IV, the original, the OST, or the OST from Halo 3, right? And I think then at that point you're really doing kind of an apples to apples comparison. That is a little bit, instead of there being such a wide range and diversity for a series with a lot of games versus a series with essentially 5 or 6 games, right? So fair enough. I think that's a good point. The other one they thought that was really good was they said Skyrim, but I would argue for the Oblivion series. Not Oblivion. Listen to me. Sorry guys, the Elder Scrolls series, right? So the idea that there is such a tremendous breadth of music from Elder Scrolls, and it is, I think, in many ways more comparable to Final Fantasy, because not only is it an RPG, but it has thematic elements that you think of far beyond just just the game itself. I think all of us could probably, that have played Skyrim, could probably hum the theme for Dovahkiin and the Dragonborn and all these other kinds of things, right? I mean, we know it because we hear it so much within the context of the game, and it remains fresh and new. And when we hear it, driving down the road or something in the car, it kind of gives us that inspiration, brings us back to that moment. So, maybe that would have been a better one. I do understand that, because there's such a great, tremendous breadth of music. That being said, what I will say is this. I found it really strange that so many of you had not played very much Halo, and I guess I just underestimated the audience. But I think there was a true lack of knowledge for Halo that went throughout this. And what I would invite you guys to do is spend some time with it, because I think you'd really, really enjoy it. I mean, Halo it's difficult to listen to all on its own, which is another way that Final Fantasy distincts itself. I mean, it is very distinguishes itself. It's very different, and it is something you can listen to as a standalone thing. Halo is very difficult to do that way, but I would invite you guys to spend some time with Halo and really kind of take that in, because there's just a ton of great music. The soundtrack for Reach, which was the last soundtrack that Martin O'Donnell did with the series, was just fantastic, and it really has this very dramatic and overly kind of sore tone of remembering something that was very sad that happened in the past. And I think all the themes are kind of bring out that thought and bring out that feeling, and as a result there's just so much good music that comes out for Reach, and Halo 3 is the same way. So, and I really can't wait to jump into Halo 4 to try to find out what the music is like now that Martin O'Donnell's no longer on the project. So there you go, guys. I mean, I totally understand what you were saying. I get it. I'm not saying any of you are wrong, but it's clear to me that I probably misunderestimated. I underestimated the audience in terms of, or at least assumed incorrectly about what you guys have in terms of areas of expertise, because it's very clear that many of you don't know anything about Halo music. You haven't really spent any time with it. All you know is kind of the main title theme, which I think is a sad thing, because there's so many great pieces of music for Halo. Okay, moving right along. So more recently, I've had a few thoughts about I had some nostalgia for the concept of what technology is like, kind of when it originates and when it first becomes kind of predominant. And as a result, I started to think to myself of how could I ask you guys a question about some of these things now that we're so far in the evolution of of how we connect to each other, how we communicate with each other, the kind of data that we share socially, otherwise, right? And so I wanted to ask you guys a question, I think that really more along the lines of goes after that nostalgia. And today I'm going to ask you all about the history of the early internet, okay? So, I want you all to put on your nostalgia caps, and I want you to think back to the first, year or so that you were using the internet, or maybe even longer, or whatever the case might be. And I want you to think about what that felt like. Try to erase what you know now in terms of context, and just think about what it was like to be using the internet for whatever purpose you were using it for at the time. Just think about what that was like for a second. And then I want you to answer this question for next week's Weekly Ringer. And it'll go something like this. What was the first moment you had using the internet where you realized the world would never be the same? And I ask this because I think we could really go in a lot of ways. Perhaps it was, I want this to be very personal. I want you guys to tell me, man, the first time I used this service, or the first time I used the internet to do X, or the first time that I, shared this kind of information. I want you guys to tell me what you were using, and I want you to tell me why that was such a staggering moment for you. And the reason why is because, or it could be any number of different reasons why, let's put it that way. But I want to understand kind of when you had that moment where you went, oh my God, this is tremendous. Because as you all remember and realize, the internet back in the early 90s, the mid 90s really more than anything, was really projected to be the answer to everything. It was going to cure cancer. We were all going to be this one giant global village, and it was going to be shared experience all over the world, and all that other BS that never came true. But what it did do was pump us full of optimism, and we jumped on, and we did things that we hadn't done before. I want to know about the first time that you had an experience on the internet, what you were using. Maybe you used a tool for the first time, maybe you saw something, maybe whatever, where you went, man, the world is never going to be the same now that this is here. That's what I want to hear about. I know it's going to be a lot of really cool stories for next week. I normally, when I ask a lot of questions for the Weekly Ringer, I have some idea of what my answer will be in my mind. This one is going to be all over the map. I'm going to have to take some time to think about this one, just like you guys are. And so, take the week to reflect. Let me know what you guys think. I think it's a really good question to find out how you guys had similar or different experiences while using the internet in the very early days of its infancy into today. So, that is the question for next week's Weekly Ringer. I am the Commodore from the Clan of the Grey Wolf. Thank you, everybody, for watching. And there is no reset button.